I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what's in store for you. You heard that minerals are in fact essential nutrients, and it's not just essential because they're important. Essential actually means that we cannot manufacture them in our bodies. We actually have to get them from our diet. That's what essential nutrients actually mean. And they contribute approximately 5 to 6% of our body weight, which is a fair weight that we're carrying around. So there's quite a lot of mineral in us. And their basic functions in general are to provide structures, so things like our bones, our teeth, our muscles. And then, of course, they also regulate processes in the body. For example, our blood pressure gets regulated through our minerals, and even our blood glucose levels. We've been talking about that a lot lately. So they're needed in small amounts, but they are extremely important, and we can't afford to have gaps of minerals in our diet. Now, the interesting thing is that, okay, this little picture looks like a nice piece of chocolate cake, but actually it isn't. It's a sliver of the earth, and that's actually where minerals are originating from. They originate in our soil, and in fact, from the rocks of the earth. And the water then passes over the rocks and picks up the minerals as it goes by. And so over time, it gets enriched with minerals. So the water and our soil are really where we get our minerals from. So if we look at that in terms of how you and I get it, and through the food chain, yes, so it comes from the rocks and the minerals and the water and the soil. And of course, plants grow in that soil. So they take out minerals from the soil, and of course the water irrigates the plants. So in turn, it also gets some more minerals. And then animals and of course humans also eat the plants. And we in turn might eat some of the animals, or we might, for example, from here, take some of the milk from that cow. And so that is the way that you and I actually get our minerals in our diet. And these are the sort of things that we're going to talk about, and perhaps some of the challenges that we have along this food chain, for example. So our body is a haven for minerals, and I think some of these are very familiar to you. When we call them major or trace, it doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. It just simply means that we need them in different concentrations. So we need things like calcium and phosphorus and magnesium, for that matter, in higher concentrations than we do iron and zinc, but equally important are the different minerals. And I think just right from the outset, just to remind ourselves that usually in neolife, we combine ingredients as sort of families. So let's say vitamin B, for example. We don't have a vitamin B1 tablet and a vitamin B2 tablet and a vitamin B12. We put a family together as a complex because that's how they actually work in nature together. So we don't generally separate our nutrients, but you'll notice with our minerals, we do that because we actually want to optimize their absorption. So we've got an iron product, we've got a zinc product, we've got a calcium with a bit of magnesium, and now we're introducing magnesium on its own product because we want to optimize absorption and bioavailability. And the reason that we have to do that is because, interestingly, although they're very important, minerals are actually not that well absorbed. That can readily be taken in, but actually pass right through the system. So it's quite a challenge to make sure that we actually get adequate amounts. So that's why we've chosen to do this specific thing, to separate them. And magnesium in particular is probably the major mineral. It actually is involved in more than 700 different biochemical reactions. In fact, more than any of the other minerals actually in the body, and does all sorts of things like produce energy, build proteins, makes hormones, as I say, you can regulates different metabolic processes that I mentioned, builds various structures in the body. So extremely important to us. So let's look at the benefits that we're going to talk about in terms of magnesium, contributing to psychological function, for example. Now that's obviously the brain, the nervous system. So we're talking here about influencing mood, for example, keeping us calm, regulating anxiety and irritability, for example. Also making sure that the nerve impulses are right, that the messages get around the body appropriately. If you were to touch a hot plate on the stove and then you pull your finger away, that message had to go from your finger to your brain and back to your finger in an instant. And magnesium, as well as other minerals like calcium, are involved in that procedure. So we have to make sure that those are working properly all the time, and magnesium has to be there and present. Muscles, the maintenance of normal muscle function. So that would be basically contraction and relaxation of that muscle so that it can actually work. But we also want to make sure that we don't have things like cramps or even tremors and some sort of weaknesses in the muscle. So magnesium needs to be present for that activity. In general, just basically coordination, just being able to use our muscles and our limbs properly. The heart is also a muscle, so it needs to be able to pump appropriately. There needs to be proper activity of that muscle, no cramping, no rhythm concerns. In our bones, we have to make, in fact, the interesting thing is we keep about almost 60 to 70% of our magnesium in our bones. So very important for bone strength, for bone density, along with calcium, of course. And of course, there are other minerals that make up bone tissue, but magnesium is actually concentrated in bone tissue and of course in our teeth as well. And the interesting thing actually is when I was talking about bones here, 60 to 70% of our magnesium is stored in there. And in fact, in other soft tissue, like in muscle tissue, for example, and probably only about 1% of the magnesium that we have in our bodies is actually in our bloodstream, which is actually what is making it difficult to ascertain whether people's levels are actually adequate or not. Because if you just have a blood test, it doesn't really give you a true picture of your magnesium status. And that's been quite an enigma and a problem, and perhaps a reason why we haven't really fully understood whether people have sufficient magnesium or not. And that is why the focus is actually starting to move to magnesium and why our scientists are having a second look at it. But another very important thing you may not be aware of is that magnesium is extremely important in energy production. In fact, probably plays its largest role as an energizer. And I'm going to explain that better because that's probably, as I say, something that might confuse one and you wonder which product you should be using to make energy. So basically, it's essential for energy production. So let's talk about energy as a word, first of all. You know, we all say, okay, I would like to have some more energy so that I can maybe move around quicker or do some exercise or just not feel so tired. But we never really quantify it. We never actually measure it. We just talk about, I'd love to have some more. And that's a bit like money, I suppose. We could say money is also a collective term. And we say, I'd like to have a bit more money so that I could buy some more food or whatever it is. But in fact, with money, what we've done is we've broken it down and we've actually given that money a name. So it is a general term, but we've given it a value, a currency. So depending where you live, let's say in South Africa, it's rands and cents, and we can actually quantify it. And we know exactly how many rands and cents we need for a certain activity or to achieve something. So actually energy, we can actually do that too. So there is a name for energy. When we manufacture energy in our cells, it actually has a name and we can actually quantify it. Not you and I, because we can't see it, but in science, you can ascertain by what you eat and what you've taken in and how your body works, how much actual energy it's making. And we do this and give it a name, and that name, in fact, is called ATP. Okay, it's actually an abbreviation for a fancy name. We don't have to know that, but ATP, like rands and cents, R and C, is actually a little energy package. And so the body actually manufactures these little packages inside our cells, and then we use them as a source of energy. So that's just to give you an idea that we actually quantify the energy. We don't just say it as a collective term. So yeah, it's an exchange. I need to have a certain amount of energy so I can do a certain amount of work, just like I need money, a certain amount of money to do or buy a certain number of things. We can quantify it. So what does it do actually with this energy? The ATP is the name of the energy. And magnesium links up with this little energy package. And together they manufacture or make cellular energy come into being. So ATP is cellular energy, but together they're a complex that makes cellular energy work. So it's our cellular energy currency, and it fuels hundreds of reactions that I talked about in our body. Right, so you might be starting to think, well, okay, so where does treonine fit in? And I thought if I took in treonine, I was getting energy because I feel more energized. Now, the interesting thing, and I'm going to go back to our very faithful little graphic that we always look at, because we can always make this into a new story. And if we look at that picture, particularly the cell on the right, that's what we would like our cells to look like, whatever type of cell they are. And that little orange circle around there is nice and plump, and it's receptive and flexible, and it's enabling those green arrows to go inside the cell to do some work, and then waste to come out the other side, or perhaps even something that's produced needs to be exported perhaps to another part of the body. But in actual fact, what we're doing this evening is we're actually talking about going inside that cell. And I think that's the first time we've actually done that. We've always talked about the cell and being energized and feeling better. and protecting the cell and repairing it and renewing it. But we actually have never really gone inside and seen where that green arrow actually goes and what it does. And in fact, what even that green arrow is. So this evening, we're going to talk about that green arrow as, let's say, magnesium, for example, and it's going to go across the membrane into the cell. So you might say, okay, well, so am I supposed to take magnesium for energy, or am I supposed to take treonine for energy? You're supposed to take both, because what's actually happening with treonine is it's an enabler. It in itself is not an energy producing or making entity. It enables substances like these green arrows to come into the cell and for them to do their work and manufacture different things, one of which, one important thing, cellular energy. So when you take treonine, and why you feel better is because things are actually getting in that cell more effectively. And we've proven that, in fact, the nutrients that are in and around the blood and trying to get into a cell, which is those green arrows, the improvement in utilization of those nutrients or those green arrows is up by 50% when treonine is present in the diet. So it's crucial that we still start with treonine, but we don't end with treonine, because in fact our cells will make energy making use of what that green arrow is contributing to the center of the cell. So I hope that puts it in perspective for you. We're not confusing our energy program. We're actually making sure that we complement it and we benefit from all the energy. So let's just remind ourselves of the benefits of magnesium: the muscle, brain function, mood, nerve transmission, obviously bone density, teeth, good structure for the skeleton, and very important, energy production. So it's making sure that we actually have all these components together. So magnesium and calcium, as we know, work together, that we've learned before, and they really do. The one, the contraction and relaxation of muscles, for example, that's very important. They both have to be together. So they actually do work in conjunction with one another. Very important to remember that. And of course, we have a product that does that, and we'll chat about that later. But in terms of how much we need, actually that's been quantified, and there's various amounts that women and men need. And these are the numbers, just so that you have some sort of reference point. But let's look at where we can actually find magnesium in our diet and how we would normally receive it. Remember, we can't manufacture it, so we have to get it from our food or an external source. Now, these foods that you see here are things we'd recommend for any good diet, as it were. The fact that we may or may not be getting them, that's of course the issue, and I don't think we're all achieving these sort of nutrients and food sources on our plate of food on a regular basis, but we do try. If we just look at those dark green leafy vegetables which we're told to eat, what gives it that dark green color, in fact, is chlorophyll, and chlorophyll takes the energy from the sun and converts it actually into food stuff. So that's actually how our plants become food entities for us. And chlorophyll actually contains the magnesium. So that's why eating dark green leafy vegetables and getting magnesium from them is very important. And all these other food substances will also obviously give us some magnesium. But the interesting thing is, why are we looking at magnesium? Because it's, as Drew pointed out earlier, even in the States, and in fact in the States, magnesium is on the risk list because high percentage of the population they've discovered are not getting the recommended daily allowance. And it's not different in South Africa. 50% of South Africans are not actually getting the recommended daily allowance, that amount that you saw on the screen earlier. And it's right across the age, the age spectrum. Younger adults, as well as people in middle age or even moving to elderly, are actually not getting adequate amounts of our magnesium. And that's something we've discovered relatively recently, because you might be thinking, well, magnesium doesn't sound like something exciting about a product. We all know about magnesium. But what we didn't know is all the reasons why we should be actually supplementing. And that's why we've kicked into gear and said we need to make sure that we make sure that the body has enough magnesium. So why are we not getting enough? There are actually some very obvious reasons that you don't get to understand as why we're looking at it now more closely. Because the levels of magnesium in our diet, yes, they're decreasing because we have poor food choices, we have refined diets, and generally it's pretty obvious we're not taking enough if we realize there's a gap. But in fact, what is really happening, and it's happening in our Western diet to all of us, is that there's a lot of food processing going along. So for example, you saw some whole grains on that slide just prior to this one. Now, if we take those whole grains and we refine them and we make, let's say, a cereal or biscuits or a donut out of them, we can lose up to 80 to 90% of the magnesium that was originally in that grain. So that's the reason why our food processing is actually affecting our diet and our magnesium levels. And the irony of it is that we actually get a cereal box, for example, and I'm sure you've seen, and it says fortified, or they actually added some various minerals or vitamins. And you think, wow, great, that's a good buy because it's got extra this and extra that. Well, actually what they've done is they've processed it out in the first place, and now they've simply put it back in, and you're actually paying for that activity of getting those nutrients back into a food that was originally processed out. So that's what's happening to our diet on a regular basis. Bioavailability, for example. Now you'll see 60 to 70% of our food-based magnesium is not absorbed. And just the way we're living and the things we're taking in terms of food or perhaps medications are affecting our absorption. Now, bioavailability isn't necessarily talking about the amount of magnesium, it's more talking about how much do we actually absorb. And so that's what's being affected. So things like just lifestyle things that you and I do, for example, diet choices that we make. And if we look at our modern dietary intake, one of the cautions that we have currently and has been for a while is to let's reduce our salt intake. And that's something that governments around the world are trying to encourage people to do. Because in fact, high levels of salt, apart from being not very good for our blood pressure, actually affect the absorption of magnesium. Alcohol does that, obviously not one or two, a glass of wine here and there is actually pretty good for us. But on a regular basis, alcohol can also hinder the absorption of magnesium, for example. So these are just things that are happening in our diets every day. Medication is certainly something on the increase. And I mean, one of our common lifestyle issues that people constantly medicated for are digestive discomfort, things like reflux, things like acidity, heartburn. And so there are medications that do a very good job, about suppressing that. But in actual fact, they hinder the absorption of magnesium, and they're very commonly prescribed. Diuretics also very commonly prescribed, and they too can flush magnesium out of the system. So when you start to actually just look at what we're doing on a modern day basis, it's not surprising that we need to take another look at magnesium. Because as you layer these effects one on top of the other, it definitely starts to impact our ability to absorb a nutrient that is essential, we have to get from our diet, and we simply can't. Also, the levels in our food in general are decreasing. So we saw there that, in fact, some of the farming processes have actually changed. We're not letting, for example, our fields perhaps lie fallow for a whole season, then come back, allow them to, in other words, revive and regenerate themselves. Because remember, the minerals are in the soil. We get them from the water and the soil, and then it gets into the plant. So if the soil is becoming depleted because of the way we're farming and sort of these quick crops and constant regular use of the same fields, we are actually not getting the minerals that should be getting into our plants that either we or the animals are eating, and so that it gets into the food chain. And it's been shown now that, in fact, I was talking about those green leafy vegetables, for example. Slowly, we're starting to find that our fruit and vegetables actually doesn't have the magnesium content that it should have. And over a period of time, maybe 50 years, but that sounds like a chunk of time. But over time, if we carry on in that way, we've already lost about 30% of the magnesium that we used to have in our green leafy vegetables and in our fruit in general. So that in itself is concerning. And that is why we're having to look at this nutrient and say, we need to fill this gap. We need to make sure that we don't allow this problem to get completely out of hand. So if we look at basically our intake, if it's poor, we don't take it in a dietary supplement form, or we don't have a fortified food, then eventually, we're going to constantly deplete our levels, and it's going to start impairing our body functions. And then there are always consequences. And so we saw some of the benefits previously. So if we look at some of the consequences in terms of, let's say, muscle, for example, one might get more muscle cramps when we're actually exercising than we might want to have, or perhaps even just many people have cramps when they're trying to sleep. So those are the sort of things that start to happen when we don't have adequate amounts. Obviously, as I said, the heart is a muscle, and so we want to make sure that it's able to pump on a regular basis in a rhythmic way. Eventually, as it's depleted, it will influence the way our body can manage different systems like blood glucose control or perhaps blood pressure. So there are consequences, as you can see, many benefits, and of course, the converse is true. It starts to affect exactly those things if we don't have enough. So yeah, I think we agree at Neolife that this is a missing link, and we need to take a bit of time to focus on it, which is what we've done. And we've put it in there amongst our individual minerals and said we need to focus and make sure that we can give people some magnesium that their bodies need and very likely are not getting. So that's what we've done. We've put a supplement together, which we believe is a very good solution, and I'm going to show you why. Because as always in Neolife, there are always Neolife differences, and there are always unique issues and features about a product that really aren't on, in any other product on the market. And this in particular has got a lot of good news about it. And I want to just introduce you to these different things. So we're going to talk about things like tri-mag and phytomag. Now, tri means 3, and phyto means plant. So we're going to talk about those components in this product. And you'll see it's called a complex because we've combined all these different things together. So let's launch in a little bit and see what these all mean. So we haven't just put in one source of magnesium. We've put in 3 different sources of magnesium. And there isn't another product on the market that has done that. Now, if we look at the magnesium double amino acid chelation, which is a bit of a mouthful, but many of you are familiar with our concept of coating the magnesium or a mineral in general, because remember I said right at the beginning, minerals are not actually very well absorbed. And so we want to prevent them from being distracted and passed right through the system. So what we have done is we have coated it. That's what chelation means, or chelation, is to coat or to protect the mineral. And we've done this with amino acids. And what are amino acids? They're proteins. What are you and I made of? Protein. So our body will happily and readily accept protein because it recognizes it. And so we've protected the magnesium, neutralized any potential problems, and allowed it to be much more readily absorbed. So that's a very big feature of the product, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we pioneered this. But then we went to different fruits, citrus fruits, and we got the magnesium and we bound it with, we call it magnesium citrate. This is actually because the fruits are water soluble. This is a very water soluble form, so it's very readily available to the system. It can swim through the blood vessels and the whole body, all the watery systems of the body, and get where it's going very, very quickly. So organically bound and very, very effective and very quick working. And then we went back to the earth. We went back to where those minerals actually started from and took magnesium oxide out of the earth. And we've put all this together. So I think you're going to agree that this tri-mag blend is really very effective in making sure that our bodies are going to get some magnesium as soon as we swallow it. And then we took it, we've taken this one step further, always this magnesium that we, in fact, years back introduced. We were pioneers in this field, and I just want to remind perhaps those who are looking in for the first time that we have a scientific advisory board, and Dr. Arthur First was, in fact, the pioneer of setting up a scientific advisory board. In fact, we were the first company in this industry to actually have such a thing. And today it's a highly credible organization, and he was one of the great minds really of the 20th century and was a pioneer, as you can see, in cancer research, a toxicologist, a pharmacologist. And in his research, he wanted to use minerals, but he realized that their absorption was going to be an issue. So he actually pioneered this process of chelating or protecting them or coating them. And so today it's something we still use, and in fact others have copied it now because it's such a very effective method. So I just wanted to remind you that that's in fact what we brought out into the marketplace and has made a huge difference to science in general. And then we have, of course, something else that is unique in the marketplace. This is a phytomag blend. So we've actually put some of these foods into the product as well. And you'll see there the broccoli and the kale, there's your green leafy vegetable, and some of the magnesium is there. We've actually checked it to make sure that it is there. And that's what we do at Neolife. We allow nature to tell us what to do, and we investigate it so that we can understand it, and then we try to combine it, but we use nature's blueprint. So we don't fully understand probably what happens in all the beetroots and the radishes and things. We know that when we put things together, they will work in synergy because that's how they're designed. So we have put these into the product along with quantified amounts of magnesium that I mentioned before. And together, this will be using nature's blueprint and allowing nature to take the lead and for us to be the investigator and understand it through science. And that is why we have tri-mag and phytomag, something very unique, something extremely effective and that is unique on the marketplace. Right, so I guess who's going to use it? Who am I going to give it to? Am I going to use it? That's the question you're probably asking yourself. Well, all of us can benefit from it. Given all the information I gave before about our, bioavailability and the crops and the food supply, I think you'll realize that there's a potential for virtually anyone to have a gap in their diet. So we will all benefit. But in fact, since we're looking at this picture, I wanted to perhaps just talk a little bit about exercise, because I think that's where energy really comes in. And I think you're going to encounter a lot of people in the sort of exercise world who are quite familiar with the benefits of magnesium from an exercise point of view, because pretty much people who are increasing their activity need an increase in magnesium compared to people in their same age group or peer group, but who are not active. So as I say, lots of sports people are familiar with the need for magnesium. Because when you're exercising, the body is using much more oxygen and requiring more energy. We're also sweating more, so that way we drain very often magnesium as well as other electrolytes. And if we're doing like perhaps a marathon or something that's very extreme, that can really interfere with normal functions of the body. The interesting thing about magnesium, remember I said it complexes, it links up with that little package of energy that is inside the cell. And what it does is it responds to the sort of exercise you're doing. So let's say you're running. It will actually reroute itself and it will go to the location of that muscle that is working. So that'll be the leg muscles. And it will go there and make sure that the energy package and the magnesium combine and enable the muscle to get the energy. If you, for example, lifting weights or something in the gym, then you're using the upper body and magnesium will shift there and it'll go to perhaps the red blood cells or to the muscle cells and enable that exercise to happen. So very, very useful tool to the exercising person. And also just in the elderly, in terms of being mobile and the muscles working, I found some research, it was on elderly women actually, and it found that the ability to walk a bit faster was better when their magnesium was replete. And in fact, when it gets difficult to get out of a chair and you have to ooh and ah and push yourself out, well, it seemed like people managed to use their muscles more effectively and get out of the chair a lot more easily than they would otherwise have done had they not been supplemented with magnesium. So pretty much we can all benefit from having magnesium for all the reasons that I've mentioned. With so many reactions, we're not getting it from our food supply, and it's necessary throughout the body. So there it is, magnesium joins up with ATP, which is the name of cellular energy. Okay, it's the name of the energy package, which when they're together manufacture or are called cellular energy. So we're talking about the energy inside the cell, not just feeling energetic. We do because our cells are energized, but this is actually what we're talking about. Having some energy packages made, magnesium linking up with them and enabling every cell to do its job. Because without that magnesium, we have side effects. We have areas that when they don't have enough muscles, for example, our bones and all we mentioned that I had of our teeth, even our mood will be affected by a lack of adequate amounts of magnesium because we don't have enough of that complex. And also because our food supply is being challenged. And that's not something that you and I actually have a lot of control over, unfortunately. As much as we try hard, a lot of these things are coming, as I said, they're layering one on top of the other and actually influencing us. So we're suggesting that you take some magnesium now, and that the dosage here is 1 tablet a day, but of course it's a 60 tablet container, you can take more. We are controlled by the regulatory requirements of the concentration. So 1 tablet a day is recommended though. As always, we never have anything artificial in terms of colors, flavors, sweeteners, or preservatives. We don't use anything genetically modified. This particular product, there are no animal-derived ingredients. So this really is an amazing, this is like a food that's just delivered in a tablet form. And talking about those sort of not having all these undesirables, I mean, these undesirable things are what are making our Western diet undesirable. So we're not going to start putting in artificial colors and flavors. We're going to make it as pure as we can and as back to nature as we can, so that we're not compounding the problem, we're actually trying to alleviate the problem. And it just makes me think about, in fact, when I talked about sports people and magnesium, there's some well-known names on the shelves, some of those ones that are slow released, for example. And having a look at them, they have artificial sweeteners, they have artificial colorants in them. They only have one form of magnesium. I have not seen another product that has 3 different forms to make sure that at every turn we're going to have magnesium in our diet. So I hope you're excited about that, because I certainly am. This is very, very unique. Even though magnesium is not a new term to all of us, so this has been put together in an extremely effective way, with nature as the focal point and science just to understand how to put it together to make it effective for our bodies. So I think that view is magnificent, and I think the product is simply magnificent, and I'm sure you will agree. So in terms of support for you, the product is available, and we have put out a little colorful one-pager which is giving you all the pricing and all the PV and BV and all the things you need to know as a distributor. It also, at a glance, gives you quite a nice little colorful synopsis of what we've talked about tonight. So I think that's quite useful, and that we've actually printed, and we will pop it into every order so that you actually will get to get the information, and you'll be able to understand the product better. The fast facts, as we always do, those are going to be on your back office. We're not printing those, but you can download them for sure. There's a very nice colorful little brochure that we've printed and is available to you, code 639. And this little video that we just saw earlier on in the presentation, that's available to you as well on your back office. So I think you've got all the tools you need. You've certainly got a product that's going to work for you. And yeah, all we want you to do is now go out there and take some magnesium now. I think probably some of you have got some questions now, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, this sounds fantastic, and I'm sure you'll agree it is. Magnesium, we didn't realize there was such a gap in our diet. But I am taking some magnesium. Maybe I'm taking CalMag, for example. So now where does this all fit in? Am I supposed to take it if I've got enough calcium and magnesium already? Yes, I think there's no reason not to take. You're not going to be overdosing by any means if you take 1 tablet alongside your CalMag, for example. The CalMag the CalMag is a much older product. And I think we have to also realize that, as with anything, it can be even in the motor industry. You buy a Mercedes in the year 2000, you buy one now, it's still a Mercedes and it comes from a good stable. But there are always going to be trimmings and features and benefits that we just, technology and science has worked out, and added to the new model. So that's exactly what happens with nutrition. We get to understand new things. We've certainly understood a lot more about magnesium. And we have better ways to understand nature, and for science to actually piece nature and science together and put it in a product like this. So this is a more modern version, if you like, because I think you can see it packs quite a punch in terms of magnesium. But our CalMag is very effective as a product, and many of you absolutely love it. In fact, it's one of our best-selling products because it is so effective. It's chelated, it has calcium and magnesium, and we've got some vitamin D, and all 3 work together. And it's particularly effective in those ratios for our bones. But we feel that magnesium needs to come in, and play a bigger part, as I said, in energy, in our nervous system, in our teeth, in our mood. It's got many other things to the heart. It's got many other things to work on. So I would suggest that you complement your CalMag and take a magnesium supplement, if that's what you'd like to do. So don't feel like you're confused. You can add if you want to. But if you feel that you've got enough and no extra problems in terms of cramping, or you've managed to resolve it with your CalMag, that's fine. But this is also going to be a product that you can certainly open a door with in terms of the exercise community. As I say, people who are out there exercising, they know about magnesium. They want their muscles to work properly. They want all the benefits, and they certainly want to be energized. So this would definitely be a product that you would recommend to that community. So I hope you're excited about it. We certainly are. It's in our warehouses now, so as of tomorrow, actually, I'm not even sure if it would be this evening, but from tomorrow, certainly you can place your orders, and all that information will be available to you, and we will pop a little price list and a little bit of information in the next order that you place for anything else. But I hope that you're going to go out there and share this product with everybody. Okay, it is for anyone. It's suitable during pregnancy, for example. Obviously, you would want to just, the lady must check with her doctor, depending on what other supplements she's taking. But there's nothing in there that would be undesirable. You can see there's literally nothing other than basic foods delivered in a different method, in a tablet form. So right across the board, this would be beneficial for everybody to take. Right, so I think that's what I've got to say. I'm very excited about it. I'm already starting to take it, so I've been fortunate enough to have it. So I'm fine, and I'm taking CalMag and magnesium together. So thanks, Drew.
Fantastic, Liz. That is super, super exciting. Thank you for just the very clear explanation. I think we have an amazing product on our hands. And we've had an extremely high number of people on this call, which is great. So I really believe that this product is going to be of value to everybody. It is available for purchase online tonight. That question is coming in quite a lot on the questions and answers channel. The code is 2723. So it's available online right now, 2723. And you will be getting it. Look out for an email tomorrow morning. You'll be getting all those fast facts and sales tools and videos on an email from our marketing team tomorrow morning. So look out for that. Or you can log on to your back office tonight and download all of those things right now. Let's just a couple of questions. And I know we're not going to be able to get through them all, but I know you did touch on this, but it's coming quite often. Does this replace CalMag? Nope.
No, and it's a very real, that's why I try to sort of address it. It's not replacing CalMag because the calcium is still important in that ratio, very specifically for bone tissue. And we don't want to lose the vitamin D component as well. But we realize that the magnesium is an issue. And even, so we want to make sure that the magnesium is available in all sorts of different forms for other components of the body as well. So that's why I say take the two together.